Greetings to all. I am back again. I am CA Meenu Agarwal, practicing chartered accountant. Um, we have come up with a series of overview of international transactions. We had already come up with part one. Today we are going to have our round two. And before we proceed on the topic, I would like to thanks my heartfelt thanks to the entire team of CSN sir and especially Vivek sir for giving us this extremely important and beautiful concept of this platform wherein we can share our knowledge and our concepts. So today we are going to talk about residential status. What are the provisions as per the domestic law and what are the provisions as per DTAA? So because our series is all related to international transaction, we will be covering even certain topics that are part of the tax treaty. Why is residential status important? What are the provisions related to residential status? What role does the residential status of a person play in DTAA? All this we are going to go through it very shortly. So moving ahead, let's understand. As a part of my earlier session, wherein I had discussed the basics of the international transaction, we had understood that any transaction that involves an international transaction will have a three limbs of tax provisions. That is, say suppose Mr. X has a in India has entered into a transaction with a person in USA. So from the taxation point of view, this particular transaction will have three limbs of tax provision which they have to look into. So Mr. X first has to look into the transaction from the point of view of Indian income tax. Then he has to look into what are the tax provision related to the country in which he has entered into the transaction, which is USA. And the third provision which he need to look into is the tax treaty provision. So India and USA would have entered into a double taxation avoidance agreement or a tax treaty which shall provide as to what are the provisions need to be kept in mind for the purpose of avoiding double taxation, or how do you enjoy the foreign tax credit and various other provisions. So today we are going to pick up the topic of residential status, and we are going to understand what are the provisions as per the domestic, that is the Indian income tax, and we are going to look into what are the tax treaty provisions that has been provided in the treaties. So just wait and watch how it goes forward. First, I am going to concentrate on the domestic law. What are the provisions of Indian income tax with respect to residential status? So before I go to the income tax particular sections, do we all know where this Income Tax Act come from? How does this Income Tax Act emanate? Anyone? So let's just brush up little bit of our provisions here. So here I would like to draw your attention to Article 265 of the Constitution of India. So this particular article gives us the concept of income tax law. It provides that Article 265 provides that no tax shall be levied or collected except for the authority of law. The Indian Income Tax Act was enacted to provide levy and collection of on income earned by a person. So this is the ground. This is the like in Hindi we say this is the neve of the Indian Income Tax Act. Now that we know how does the Indian Income Tax Act emanate, let's see what are the provisions that one need to look into for the purpose of for as we just read. What does it say? It says that no tax shall be collected or levied except for the authority of the law for the purpose of levy and collection of tax on the income of the person. So if a person has an income, you need to understand what is the scope, how do you determine the taxability, and what are the bases or what are the different provisions that has been provided. So today we are going to look into section 5, which defines the scope, section 6, which defines the residential status, and section 9 that provides the deemed income concept. So let's see what and all we are going to cover today. First, we are going to focus on very basics, that is of section 5 of the income tax. What does the section 5 of income tax act says? The first thing that you need to determine is the residential status. Section 5 says First, you identify whether a person is a resident or a non-resident. If the person with respect to whom you are looking into, relevant provisions in that is a resident, then refer to 5.1 of the refer the provisions of 5.1 of the act. If he is a non-resident, then refer to 5.2 of the act. So because today we are discussing all this related to international transactions, our focus will be more on 5.2, that is for the non-residents. What does phi 2 say? What if you have now suppose any of my colleagues, CA practicing colleagues, they receive a query as to a person stays for so many number of days, and he is a non-resident. Basically he is a non-resident. How do you determine as to how the income will be taxed in the hands of that particular person? So you have to refer to this phi 2 provisions, which says you need to see there are two limbs again to this phi 2a and phi 2b. Section phi 2a, section phi 2b. Section phi 2a says that if such non-resident, so I'll refer to that person as a non-resident, if that non-resident has received or has deemed to receive that amount, any amount for a particular transaction that he has entered into such year in India. Important is he should have received, or it should be deemed to be received. It should relate to that particular previous year. It should be received by himself or any other person. If these conditions are satisfied, then you will treat that income as being taxable in India. So this is on receipt basis. Now 5.2b says if your income is not on receipt basis, suppose there are then there are accrual provisions. So it says whether there is a accrual or deemed to accrue concept, or if this is arising or deemed to arise, again reference will be made to that particular year in India. So if you have any transaction which is deemed to accrue in that particular year in India, then also that particular income will be treated as being taxed in India. So let's understand how are we going to determine which are the income that are treated as deemed income. Is there any separate section we need to look into, or it is just on a logical basis? Hold on, we have section 9 of the Indian Income Tax Act, which says or which provides list of provisions for understanding the deemed income concept. Now the question next you might think is, am I going to cover section 9 over here? If I start covering section 9 over here, residential concept will be left. So I am planning to come up with section 9 provisions in different parts in our next, part 3, part 4. So just be in touch with the slides that I've been sharing, and with the series I'm coming up with. Next, I'm going to come up with section 9 deemed income basis, and then again we'll have a comparison between domestic law and the tax treaties. Now, what happens when once you have determined that what part of income will be taxable and what part of income not? But then it is simple, you have to tax at the rates whatever is there as per the income tax act. But hold, how will you determine whether a person is a resident in India? How will you determine whether a person is a non-resident in India? All of us are aware that a person has been defined to include, an individual, HUF, AOP, BOI, company, any other person. So we have a definition of person also. Now for each kind of a person, we have certain criteria that need to be fulfilled so that we can determine whether he's a resident or non-resident. Let's all revise, for one, see what are the residential provisions of different persons which are provided in section 6. So section 6, first we are going to cover the residential status. So this is how residential status looks. For an individual, you will have a resident and ordinary resident, or resident but not ordinary resident. With respect to individual HUF, you will have non-resident. So we are going to understand what are the provisions, how do you classify them between these three categories. Any other person other than individual or HUF, you will have resident and non-resident. Now, with respect to individual, what are the provisions? Let's all quickly revise. Though we have been reading from our IPCC level, but let's just revise all this. Now, if you have a case of an individual where you need to determine whether he is a resident in India or non-resident in India, then first thing you have to do is to check with respect to the number of days of stay in India. So there are two conditions which have been provided. You have to satisfy any one to determine whether he's a resident or he's a non-resident. Suppose you have a case where a person had come in between the year and say somewhere in December. So you have to calculate the number of days and see where he fits in the provision. The first condition says he should be for a period. He should be in India for a period of 182 days or more in the previous year. If he is suppose being less than 182 days, so this condition is not satisfied. You have to move to the other condition and then check whether he has stayed in India for a period of 60 days or more in that previous year, along with 365 days or more during the four immediately preceding previous years. So these provisions are going to help you to understand whether he is a resident or he is a non-resident. If he is a non-resident, go back to your scope of total income, determine what his income, and then tax him. Now, if he is a resident, you need to further drill down and figure out as per section 6.6 as to whether he's an ordinary resident or he is a not ordinary resident. Okay, Meenu, how does this make a difference? Just hold for a minute, be with me. We will understand how this will make a difference. How do you determine whether he's an ordinary resident? Again, there are two conditions. If a person satisfies both of these conditions, he will be treated as an ordinary. And so it is but obvious if he satisfied any one, then you will treat him as a not ordinary. So what are these two conditions? You have to again see if he is a resident for the 2 out of 10 previous year, and if he has stayed for 730 days or more during 7 years immediately preceding previous year. So all this data basically you need to check as to the number of days of stay in India to arrive at a conclusion as to whether he will be an ordinary or a not ordinary resident. So this was the residency with respect to individuals. Now let's move ahead with respect to the residential status or the provisions of determining the residential status of a person other than individual and HUF. Sorry. So uh, with respect to HUF or other person firms AOP and BOI, the Act says if the control and management is partly or wholly in India, then you will treat such person as a resident, else he will be a non-resident. Now let's go to what about the company? Meaning you have not covered company over here. So company, the provisions are slightly different. How are they different? This is how they are different. If it is an Indian company, obviously Indian company will be a resident. Second condition, which they have incorporated now, is that if the company's place of effective management, we used to recite poem in our schools. This is also nothing but the same poem, place of effective management, POEM. If the company's place of effective management in that particular year is in India, then the company will be treated as a person or as a resident in India, otherwise as a non-resident. So this was a quick recap of how the residential status of people or the persons has been defined in the Act. Now we have been discussing about the scope, we have been discussing about the residential status. Let's understand how is the taxation being done. I guess you might be having questions like why and how the taxation will be arrived. What is the importance? So this is how it is important. Now, if you determine that a person, when I say person, anyone, individual, HUF, AOP, BOI, other person, companies, anyone. If you conclude, as per section 6, that he or it is a resident, then his global income will be taxable in India. That's what the provisions of the Act says. Now you say, no, I have not come to any such conclusion. The person is a non-resident. Then what we need to do? Then what you have to do is you have to first determine the scope. We'll go back to the scope where it says receipt or deemed to be received in India, or accrue or arise, deemed to or accrue or arise in India. So if you determine that such person is a non-resident, then only the Indian income, only such part of Indian income will be taxable in India as per the provisions of Income Tax Act. So here we have very nicely brushed up all the provisions of the residential status of the Income Tax Act. Now let's go to double taxation avoidance agreement or the tax treaties, and let's understand how and why tax treaty is important. Why is why do you have to go back to okay, once you have determined as per the Indian income tax that he is a resident, now next what? Now, I'll go back to my example where Mr. X, who's an Indian resident, had a transaction in USA. Now suppose we come to a conclusion that he is a resident in India and in US also. Now he has to pay double tax in both the countries. Now, how do we overcome this? Why is he bound to pay the tax in other country? We have learned that there are two types of citus. One is residence, one is source. By way of source citus, US will tax him. By way of residence citus, India will tax him. So here becomes the reason as to why you need to go to double taxation. But why particularly Article 4? So the objectives why you need to refer to that to refer to Article 4 is that once you have a transaction between two countries, you need to check whether this particular convention or a tax treaty or a double taxation avoidance agreement is applicable to you or not. So if you read a convention, it says the resident of that contracting state. So once you become a resident of any of the contracting state, then you are eligible to avail and enjoy the benefits of the double taxation avoidance agreement. In the same way, what is the other reason? In the same way, or the other reason, now in my example where Mr. X has been taxed for the same income, so it means the same person is taxed for the same income in two different countries, which we read, which we understood last time in a part one, that these are called juridical double taxation. And where the same income and the same person is taxed in two different countries. So once you identify what is the residential status, then Article 4 will help you also to overcome this juridical double taxation. How? Just hold a little, we are going to understand that. Now, it is also possible that a person can have a dual residency. Okay, so now you mean to say that a person can be a resident of two different countries? So, in the case where we are discussing, Mr. X can be resident of country India and also US or any other country for that matter. Yes, it is possible because as in India, the number of days of stay is 182 days or more, or such number of days concept has been included. There are other countries also which have the same kind of concept. So, if for any reason you are in two different countries and you are satisfying the criteria for the residency, you become dual resident. And we learned that whenever you are a resident, your global income is taxable, right? So to overcome all these, the objective is to overcome all these hurdles or all these double taxation, and to determine how the scope, how the convention is applicable to you, we have to refer to Article 4. Now, in our part one, which was related to basic concepts of international taxation, we read that there are three different types of conventions, model conventions that are available. That is OECD, UK, and USA. So now the question is: does all the convention speak about Article 4? Does all the convention give you provisions related to residential? How do you determine the residency? So let's see. The answer is yes. All the model conventions give Article 4 as a basis for determining the residency of the of any person of the contracting state. So it provides certain provisions which we shall shortly look into. For all my practical discussion purpose, we are going to take OECD model convention as a basis, and then we'll see if the provisions of UN and US are different. Then I will highlight it wherever it is required. I have just been. After understanding what are the sub clauses of Article 4, let's first understand what does Article 4.1 define. Why? What does it define as to who can be a resident of a contracting state? Now, I have highlighted few of the terms over here. Focus on that. You have to read through the entire thing, but let me just focus on those highlighted points. It says any person who, by reason of his domicile, residence, place of management, or any other criteria, shall become the resident of a contracting state and shall be liable to tax as per the provision of that particular laws of the state. Okay, so this is the first point which comes up in 4.1. Then it gives certain exclusion. It says that like it's first let me explain this. It says that it will not include any person who is liable to tax only for the reason of income being taxable from source. Like in my example where I was talking about Mr. X, he was having certain income from USA. Now in USA he would be taxable, say suppose, because it has a source in USA, right? So if you have a scenario of income being taxed only because you have a source over there, then it will not be part of your 4.1 resident. Okay, so now we are going as to what will be the provisions of. Sorry, I am so sorry, yeah, today it's happening a lot. I'm sorry. So I'll start again for. Acha. Acha, so you want me to do 4.1 again or how? अच्छा, ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है, विल डू दैट। या आई स्टार्ट इमीडिएटली ना। ठीक, क्या करूँ, सॉरी, और क्लोज कर लूँ। ओके, नाउ फाइन। ओके ओके, थैंक्स थैंक्स, या। So, after understanding the clauses, what are the clauses? Let's understand how is a resident of a contracting state being defined under Article 4.1. So, this is how Article 4.1 is being mentioned or specified in the tax treaties, and this is as per the OECD Model Convention. So, what does it say? It says that if a person is a resident due to his domicile, resident, place of management, or any other reason, then he shall be treated as a resident of that state and shall be liable to tax. Liable to tax as per the provision of that particular state. Now, Article 4 will also provide an exclusion. It says that if a person is liable to tax only because of the source citus, that he is liable to tax only because he has a source from that country, then Article 4.1 provisions will not be applicable. So this is, as I said, is as per OECD Model Convention. Let's see whether how does the other convention define the resident of the contracting state. Now OECD, as we just discussed, it says that it should be by reason of domicile, residence, place of management, or any other criteria. UN goes one step ahead and says that a person shall be treated as a he shall be liable to tax by reason even of place of incorporation. Okay, it has one added value. Now US Model Convention goes one step ahead and says that apart from these two criteria, apart from the criteria as mentioned in OECD and UN, even the citizenship concept, even the, by reason of citizenship, a person shall become a resident and shall be liable to tax in that particular state. So, one word which has been highlighted in Article 4.1 was liable to tax. So, what do you mean by liable to tax? Let's understand if it has been defined or what is the importance of liable to tax. Now, liable to tax means you should be subject to the comprehensive taxation in that comprehensive taxation on your total income, which means that a person should be taxable on his income. Now let's understand this by way of example. Now in you have a partnership firm and you have a partners, you have certain partners who would have created that partnership firm. right? So by provisions of this fiscally transparent entities, wherein only the partners are liable to partners are you know uh, are treated as being taxable persons who are liable to tax in that particular country, and not the partnership firm. So in this case, only the partners will be liable to tax and not the partnership firm. So this word liable to tax becomes very important. Okay. So now we have a very important judgment. The what do you say, like a landmark judgment by the apex court in India in the case of Azadi Bachao Andolan, where this liable to tax was discussed in detail to understand that, say suppose a person has a taxable income, but because of certain exemptions, that person satisfy all the conditions of the exemptions, and he ultimately is not liable to pay tax. So how do you treat that kind of a person? So the apex court, the honorable supreme court, said that you need to concentrate on the legal situation and not the physical fact. So what does you mean by legal situation and physical fact? See, if a person is liable to pay the payment, then that will be treated as a physical fact. But we are looking at legal situation, wherein as per the provisions of the tax, you are legally treated as liable to tax. So at the end, whether you are liable to pay, whether you're paying the tax or not, it does not matter. What matters is your income liable at the initial stage to tax or not? So this was the judgment by the apex court. We saw Article 4.1 say something about liable to tax. Now let's understand that anything has been described, discussed, defined in our Indian Income Tax Act. So there are now suppose if you have a scenarios like these, like wherein a person has an income but is not taxable because of the threshold limit. You have a person has an income but he is exempt, claims a deduction or exemption under section 10 or 10 AA, and his income is set off due to losses or allowances. So in all this scenario, how do you call, or when do you call? Do you call these people as a liable to tax, or you do not call? Whether it has been clarified, defined in the act? Yes, not very. It was not defined from way back or something. It was just introduced by the Finance Act 2021 under Section 2, subclause 29A, wherein liable to tax is defined to mean a person when there is a liability to pay tax under the law of the country, and also includes a case wherein subsequently there is a imposition of wherein the tax has been imposed, but subsequently you enjoy certain exemptions due to the fulfillment of certain conditions. So here also Indian income tax has been on a very safer side and has included this provision to come to clear all the confusion, overcome all such confusion and litigations which happens due to this liable to tax concept, and has defined in the act under section 2 subsection 29A. Now, just to give you a feel of how the treaties look, because we have read that there is this OECD model convention, we have UN model convention, we have US model. So is it important that the members of UN or OECD are required or are bound to follow all those the format or the wordings, whatever is being mentioned in those conventions? Ultimately, or I would say actually, no, they are not bound by it, but it is just a kind of role model. It is just a kind of a basis for them. The both the countries are given the freedom to enter into the convention which is mutually agreeable by both the countries, and with any modification to which they mutually agree. Okay, so some of the examples we are going to look at here. So I have picked a few tax treaties wherein we have different definitions under Article 4.1. So if you see in Article 4.1, India Singapore, it says a person who is resident in accordance with the taxation of that state. It doesn't go forward. It says you go back to that state, see what is the provision of that state, and you come to the conclusion of the residential status. When it comes to UAE, it defines the provisions separately for India and separately for UAE. So for India, it is same like domicile, resident, place of management, or any other concept. But in case of UAE, it defines the number of stays that you need to have. It should be present for 183 days. It should be incorporated or managed in UAE. So if you satisfy these conditions as per 4.1, then you will be treated as a resident of India or resident of UAE. Now we have a third, tax treaty, which is altogether little different, I would say. A person who is resident by reason of his domicile, residence, place of head or main office, or any other criteria of similar nature. So every tax treaty gives you a different flavor. So it doesn't mean that why we are referring to OECD or UN. OECD and UN, EU are just the format. Okay, so you can refer to the provisions. The countries can refer to them, whichever is more beneficial. They can follow that. So before I go ahead, I just got a question in my mind. Uh, is India a member of OECD or no? Any guesses? Anyone who would have seen my part 1 video, I guess they would be able to give answers to this, because the answer is no. India is not a member. India is just a follower, and is a very active follower. So India need not have to follow the OECD Model Convention provisions, but it is, as I said again, mutually agreeable between two countries, and if they find it fit, they do follow the same. Now, after 4.1, say I come out with this kind of a scenario wherein Mr. P happens to be a resident of state A for the period Jan 1st to December 31st. After applying, what is the definition and all, he travels to state B. And after traveling, he becomes a resident because he is there for more than 183 days. So I'm not going into which tax treaty and what are the provisions and all. We are just taking to understand what is our next article 4.2 is trying to tell. Now, what is the conclusion? What do you think will be the conclusion after going through all the the above facts? It looks like Mr. P has become Mr. P. Sorry, it shows Mr. P and Mr. A. It's Mr. P. I couldn't change it in the other two places, I guess. We'll treat it as Mr. P everywhere. So Mr. P ultimately becomes resident of both state A and state B. Okay. So now what are you going to do? We are talking all about double taxation avoidance. Oh God! Now I have come to a case where he's a resident of both state A and state B. Now what are we going to do? So that's where Article 4.2 come into picture. Article 4.2 comes with certain rules, criteria, which will help you to come to a consensus as to who will be treated as a resident of which country. Okay, let's see what are those rules and provisions. Very interesting chart. Just stick to 1A, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we are going to discuss about 1A, 2, 3, and 4. We are going to come back to this start again. The start will be of very help to you once you understand what I'm trying to tell here. But permanent home available, center of vital interest, habitual abode, national, MAP. These are the 5 bases with the help of which you will determine whether a person is a resident of which state. Now, like we saw Mr. P, who is a resident of both state A and state B. You have to start analyzing one by one in the same sequence of 1A, 2, 3, and 4 to come to a conclusion. Okay, so he will be treated as a resident of this particular country and not of both the countries. Okay, before going to this start, let me take you through first, meanings or the important points of all these terms. What do you mean by permanent home? Very logical term. Permanent home, where you live or which belongs to you. You have an apartment where you stay, and it is available for all the time. 365 days it is there, whether you travel and come back, but there is a home to which you come back. So the permanency plays an important role. So you have to check whether Mr. P in state here has a permanent home or in state B has a permanent home. Okay, this is the first check. Then if you're not able to arrive at conclusion based on permanent home test, you will move to center of vital interest. You have to see where does Mr. P has economic interest or personal interest. So, oh my God, such a heavy words. What do you mean by personal interest? Personal interest means where you have your family. Where does Mr. P has his family? Where does Mr. P have his social connects? Where does Mr. P has his business, or where does he have his occupation? So if you're not able to decide based on home, then you move to center of vital interest. Now for some reason, if you're not even able to find out, because after applying these 1 and 1A tests, you will go to the habitual mode. That is where you stay continuously or repeatedly. So you will check again whether Mr. B stays in state A continuously, or he stays in state B continuously. Okay, so after this also I'm not able to conclude. Next, what you will check, Mr. P is a national or citizen of which state, A or B? Okay, if you get an answer here, well and good. If unfortunately even here you're not able to get your answer, you have to move to MAP. So where you have to approach certain authorities, you have to refer, give your cases and facts, and then they will help you to come to the conclusion. Now let's go back to our slide and see what exactly are we trying to say. So as I said, first you have to check whether Mr. P has a permanent home or not. If he has, okay, if he has, you check whether he has in both the countries or if he has in one country. If he has a permanent home only in one country, he will be treated as a resident. If he has in both the countries, then you will go to center of vital interest, where you have to check where his social connects are, where his occupation is, where his business is. And if it is determinable, hooray, he's a resident. If it is not determinable, then you have to go back to a case of habitual mode. If you don't have a permanent home, if you're not able to identify by center of vital interest, go to habitual mode. What is habitual mode? Where you have a consistency, you stay repeatedly. If you're able to identify that, okay, yes, it is one of these country of state A or B, say suppose it is state A, then he is a resident of state A. If you determine that he is of both the states or he is of none of the states, he doesn't stay in both the states on a repeated or a continuous basis, you move to the third point, which is your nationality. If you're able to determine his nationality in any one of the country, yes, you conclude he is a resident of this particular country. If you're not able to, then you have to go to MAP. So this is how, and mind you, again and again, I'm telling you, this is the process 1, 1A, 2, 3, and 4. You cannot move first MAP up and permanent home in the last. The treaty says this is the way what you have to follow. So this is a tiebreaker rule. In our case of Mr. P, he's a resident of state A. He just travels to state B, and because of which he becomes. And his permanent home, we are able to get the answer at the first level because he stays there. He just travels. The fact is he just traveled to state B for some purpose. So we are going to conclude that his permanent home is here in state A, and hence he's a resident of state A. Right? So this is how we come to a conclusion. But because for some reason I'm not able to get an answer, then move to the next point, but in the same order. I'm repeating again, it should be in the same order of permanent home, center of vital interest, habitual mode, nationality, and then entity. Okay, so this is a tiebreaker rule for individuals. Now let's understand whether you have any breaker rule for a person other than individuals. So yes, we do have. If there is an existence of dual residency, three different model convention gives us three different bases. So OECD says you should have a place of effective management or where it is incorporated. If you have, then this will help you to determine where the residency will be considered as per the OECD model convention. And UN model convention says if you have a place, or you first determine the place of effective management, and wherever you are able to determine this, then it will become the residency. US is a little different as always. It says that if where the company is being created or organized, that place will be treated as a residential a place of that particular person. And other than companies, if you have AOP, BOI, and things, then you have to refer back to the authorities. So this is a tiebreaker of persons other than individuals. Now let's understand in detail something in common which is here and in our Income Tax Act. What is that? Now, if you remember the slide where I was referring to the residential status provisions of a company, it says that there has to be a place of effective management in Indian Income Tax Act. So let me just give you a little brief here. We never had a concept of concept. First, I'm going to discuss about the domestic law. The place of effective management never found a place in our Indian Income Tax Act up to year 2015. though it became effective only from 2017. So till then, it was said that if a company has been wholly, owned and managed by persons in India for the entire year, then it will be treated as a residency. Now, people used to, find loopholes, and they used to have one of the board meetings outside India and get done away with this provision. So, to overcome this, POEM was introduced. So, wherever I refer POEM, it means place of effective management. So the provisions of place of effective management were introduced. Now, is this place of effective management something new? It is new probably for the Indian income tax. Indian income tax for Indians, yes, but it is an internationally accepted provision for the purpose of determining the residential status. So where you have a double taxation and you need to see how to come over this, or basically a tiebreaker for companies, then you refer to the provisions of POEM. So let's understand. I'm going to first discuss very important terms you need to understand for the purpose of POEM. If you understand these three terms, then determination of POEM and applying all those becomes very easy. First, you need to understand what is POEM. As the name itself says, the place of effective management. So it means that a place where key management and commercial decisions are taken for the purpose of conducting business as a whole shall be treated as a place of effective management. That place will be treated as a place where the company will be called as a residence of that place. Okay, so place where key decisions, commercial decisions are taken. So this will be place of effective management. Now, another term, I will just brush you through the terms first, then we'll proceed with further. Another term you need to look into is active business outside India. Now, once you have a active, how do you identify whether you have an active business outside India? So you understand by the term, right? Active business, you have a very active business which is outside India. How do you determine? You need to see there are four cumulative conditions. It says your passive income should be less than 50% of your total income, right? Where in India, and less than 50% of your total assets are situated where? In India. Less than 50% of total employees are situated where? In India. These less than 50% of employees are situated or are residents in India. And the payroll expenses of these employees, which we spoke in third point, are less than 50% of the payroll expenses. So first thing, keep in mind, you have to satisfy all the four conditions to conclude whether the business is actively outside India or, I'm sorry, active business outside India or not. Okay. Now, total assets is very easy. Employee is easy to understand. Payroll is easy to understand. What is something new? That is passive income. Is passive income being defined? Okay, let me first tell you what I'm discussing over here is all from the Indian income tax provisions, right? We have this circular which came in 2017, which describes all these. Okay, though it is an internationally accepted concept, let's understand from Indian point of view what it is, and then you can refer back. Once you're clear with the domestic law, you can easily compare it. What is a passive income? The circular, the CVDD also clarifies that you need to see the income which has been earned from both purchase and sale to and from A. First thing is you have a associated enterprise, you have a purchase transaction, you have a sale transaction, you have earned some income. That income plus any other income for that matter, royalty, dividend, capital gain, rental income, whether or not AE is involved or you have it from any non-AE companies. So if you have these two kind of nature of income, you need to first total it and see whether 50% of such total income 50% of such total income is less than 50% of such total income is in India or outside India. So these three terms are very important. Understand it very clearly. Go through it again and again so that you get a hold of it. Right now, let's move to see what's the clarifications of the guidance given by the CBDT. Now, how do you check whether the POEM is there or not? First thing you have to do is you have to check for a company whether it has active business outside India or not. How do you do that? We just discussed there are four cumulative conditions. You apply those four and see whether ABOI, active business outside India, or no. Now, first let me come to yes. if you are able to conclude that it has active business outside India, then you have to check. Then you have to still check whether the majority of the board of directors meeting had been held outside India. If yes, then you conclude that the place of effective management will be outside of India. This is where it gets concluded. Now, if you say that active business outside India is, a company does not have active business outside India, one of the conditions of those four cumulative conditions were not satisfied. Then, how do you determine? Then, what am I supposed to do? You have to first identify who are all the people who take the, go back to the definition, who take key managerial and commercial decisions. When you identify those people, you determine the place where such decisions are taken. Where do such people stay, and how do they, which place do they take such decisions? Based on this, you will identify, okay, whether the place, whether where is the place of effective management, whether in India or outside India. So poem check, first step, ABOI. If ABOI is fulfilled, then check whether maximum BOD, board of directors, has been held, and then that place will be. If it is outside India, then poem is outside India. If in India, it will be in India. But you have to check this. ABOI, it says no. You have to check who are the people who take the management and commercial decisions. See where these decisions are taken, and then conclude where the poem is, whether in India or outside India. Now, key points you need to keep in mind. Poem, needs to be determined on a yearly basis, or it is a one-time activity. You have to identify, determine, calculate every year, because of the factors involved. ABOI, passive income, your number of employees, every data keeps changing, so you have to calculate it every year. Okay, me to tell me one thing, how am I going to determine ABOI? You said there should be passive income, you said there should be total assets. Should I take it only of the previous year we are referring to? How are we supposed to do? So the CBDT clarifies that you have to take the average of the data of 3 years basically. So that will be the previous year and two preceding years, like how we have normally in the income tax provisions. So the average of 3 years data, that is the previous year and two previous year, immediately preceding year. Then you will come to a conclusion as to, ABOI, those four cumulative conditions need to be satisfied. Now, place of effective management is a substance over form. What do you mean by substance? Oh my god, this is very heavy. What do you mean by substance over form? See, understand, a company can have more than one place of management. Okay. But a company will have only one effective place of management. So there will be only one place where there will be a wherein you have key managerial and commercial decisions will be taken. So you need to keep this in mind, that it is substance over form. So this is a important point. Now, okay, we read what is CBDT say, what is the definition, what is how do you calculate. Now, if you come across a point where a foreign company is said that after applying the poem provisions is said to be a resident of India, then what am I supposed to do? Because that is a foreign company, taxable at a different rate. Now you become a resident. Being a resident, total income is taxable. The the benefits what are available to the residents become applicable. You have deductions from 32 of our Indian income tax business chapter. So, how are we going to do? Do we have to go to each and every provision? Then we call for some assessments. But hold, for that purpose, Wide Finance Act 2016, Section 115 JH has been incorporated, wherein it provides detailed, provisions or understanding of which provisions you need to apply when, in case a foreign company becomes a resident in India. So, whenever you have a conclusion that foreign company has become a resident, refer to 115 JH. It will help you as to which are all the residential provision that becomes effective, whether your global income will be taxable, whether you can give the depreciation benefit, you cannot give, what are the deductions allowable, not allowable. Please refer to 150 JH. Now I have given a case study over here. After understanding the poem, I guess you would be able to solve this very easily. So we have a company A, which is a sourcing entity in country X, which is a 100% subsidiary of Indian company. All the warehouse and stock are the only assets of the company and are located in country X, where company A is. Employees are also in country X. So please go back to that ABOI, why this employees assets are coming. Then they have given the income breakup. You have 30% of income where purchases are made from non-AE and sold to AE. 30% of income where purchases are made from AE, sold to AE. 30% of income where purchases are made from AE and sold to non-AE, and 10% of income is by way of interest. So first step you have to do is calculate the passive income. If you remember, passive income means income by both way of purchase and sale to and from AE, right? So we will go to this point where it says purchase are made from and sold to AE. The first one is not satisfied, so we'll go to the second one and see whether the third one is also satisfied. No, so only the second one qualifies for passive income. In the same way, 10% of the income by way of interest. So point number 2 and 4 put together becomes 40%. It says if you have passive income less than 50% of your total income in India, then it will be treated as ABOI. So the first condition has been fulfilled, and hence you will conclude that the company is engaged in active business. It is not only because of one; it is because of the four conditions. Meaning you are telling it wrong. So it has to be. You have to see even the total assets. You have to see even the employees. Okay, we read that. Here the warehouse are located in country X, assets are in country X, employees are in X. So we are fulfilling this condition, and hence we can conclude that company is engaged in active business outside India. Now let's extend this. Now the facts remain the same, only of case study one. Okay, with the variation that a company has a total of 50 employees. There are 50 employees. 47 employees managing the warehouse, storekeeping, and accounts, and are located because the warehouse and store were in country X. So all the employees who are managing are also in country X, but the MD CEO are resident in India. The total payroll expenditure of 50 employees is 5 crore, and the annual payroll expenditure of these people who are in India is 3 crore. So now what you should do, you have to go back to point number 3 and 4. First, you have satisfied because it is in continuation. Passive income, yes, it is less, so it will be ABOI. Now the stores and everything is also second condition also fulfilled. Third condition, it says 50 less than 50% of employees should be in India, right? So here what we saw, that 47 employees out of 50, 47 employees are outside India. So that condition also not been satisfied. Now next comes the payroll expenditure, that is also in excess of 50%. So when all the four conditions being satisfied, we can say that it is ABOI is not been fulfilled. Let's make little more alteration to this. Case study one will go back to, and we'll say that the directors of a company are Indian residents, and the board of directors meetings were held as followed: two were held in India and three were held outside India in country X and in country Y. So now you have to see how you are going to conclude. You remember the chart we said ABOI being fulfilled, and then we have to go and see the majority of board of director meetings wherever it will be held will be the poem. So company A is active business outside India as per the facts established in case one. Now we go back and say, okay, we have to see where are the majority of the board of directors meeting being held. So the board meetings are being held majorly out of India. Okay, I mean, why you are telling? Because see, three out of five are held outside India. It doesn't matter whether it is in country X or country Y. Three are being held outside India, and hence it shall be presumed to be outside India. Okay, with this, I come to the conclusion of this resident part of residential status analysis provision as per the domestic law and as per the DTAA. I hope it has been helpful to you all. Please do, comment as to if you have any clarifications, if you have any queries, or if you have any particular topic which you want me to come back in the next series. Do come back, and you can contact me if you have any queries on any of these my details, as you can see on the screen. And these are little technical topics. I request you, please follow all these series so that you get a hold of how international transactions are undertaken and what are the complexities we see because of the digital era. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourself.